Growing up as the youngest of 3 siblings, I'd always been the family afterthought. While my brother Marcus excelled at everything, star quarterback, valedictorian, full scholarship to Harvard Business School, I quietly pursued art and hospitality management at a state school. The family narrative was clear. Marcus was destined for greatness and I was destined to struggle. "She's got no business sense," Dad would tell his golf buddies whenever my career came up. Wasting time on hotel management when she could have followed Marcus into finance. Mom would nod sympathetically as if my career choice was a personal disappointment she'd learned to accept with grace. The family dynamic crystallized perfectly at every gathering. Marcus would hold court at the center of attention, regaling everyone with stories of his latest business conquest, while I sat quietly in the corner, occasionally asked to help serve drinks or clear plates. It was an arrangement everyone seemed comfortable with. Everyone except me, though I never voiced my objection. 3 years ago, when Marcus announced his engagement to Victoria, a pharmaceutical heiress from Connecticut, the family celebration lasted for weeks. The engagement party was held at the country club, with 200 guests toasting their perfect match. I was invited, naturally, but seated at a table with distant cousins and family friends who barely knew my name. "Isn't it wonderful how successful Marcus has become?" Aunt Helen had gushed that night. And poor little Emma, still figuring things out. The condescending pat on my shoulder that followed became a family trademark gesture, one I'd grown accustomed to receiving. The wedding planning consumed our family for 18 months. Victoria wanted everything perfect for their power couple celebration, as she called it. The venue selection alone took 6 months, with the family touring luxury hotels across the East Coast, searching for a location worthy of Marcus's success story. When they finally settled on the Grand Metropolitan, a flagship luxury hotel in downtown Boston, the family was ecstatic. "Only the best for Marcus and Victoria," Mom declared. "This is where important people get married." The irony wasn't lost on me, but I kept my thoughts to myself as always. The wedding weekend arrived with all the pomp the family had anticipated. Marcus's groomsmen were a collection of investment bankers, consultants, and entrepreneurs, each more accomplished than the last. Victoria's side included pharmaceutical executives, old money socialites, and political connections. Together, they represented the kind of network Marcus had always wanted to join. I arrived at the Grand Metropolitan on Friday evening for the rehearsal dinner, wearing a simple navy dress I'd chosen specifically to avoid drawing attention. The hotel's opulent lobby buzzed with wedding guests, all designer clothes and confident laughter. I checked in quietly at the reception desk, using the room reservation Marcus had made for family members. "Emma Williams?" the desk clerk asked, consulting her computer. "Oh yes, we have you in the premium suite on the 28th floor. She handed me a key card with an odd smile. "Please let us know if there's anything at all we can do to make your stay more comfortable." The rehearsal dinner took place in the hotel's private dining room, an elegant space with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Marcus and Victoria held court at the head table, surrounded by their wedding party and immediate family. I was seated at a side table with elderly relatives and family friends who spent most of the evening discussing their various ailments. "Emma's still in the hospitality business," Mom explained to the table when someone asked about my career. "She manages some little boutique hotels." The dismissive tone was subtle but unmistakable. Several people nodded politely before changing the subject back to Marcus's recent promotion to senior vice president. The wedding ceremony itself was flawless. Victoria looked stunning in her custom Varawang gown, and Marcus beamed with the confidence of a man whose life was unfolding exactly as planned. I sat in the 4th row with family friends, watching my brother marry into the kind of success our parents had always dreamed of for him. After the ceremony, guests moved to the hotel's grand ballroom for the reception. The space was transformed into something from a fairy tale, with thousands of white orchids, crystal centerpieces, and ambient lighting that made everyone look like they belonged in a magazine spread. The guest list read like a who's who of Boston's business elite, with pharmaceutical executives, investment bankers, and political figures mingling over champagne and caviar. I found my assigned seat at table 12, near the back of the room. My table mates included a few of Marcus's high school teachers, some distant relatives I barely knew, and Victoria's elderly great-aunt who spent most conversations complaining about the volume of the music. It was clearly the table for guests who needed to be invited but didn't warrant premium placement. As dinner was served, I watched Marcus and Victoria making their rounds to each table, graciously thanking guests for attending. When they reached our table, Marcus gave me a quick hug and Victoria offered a polite smile, but they didn't linger. There were more important people to greet, more significant relationships to maintain. That's when Marcus's college friends at the neighboring table began their commentary. "Look at her sitting alone over there," whispered James, Marcus's former roommate who now worked at Goldman Sachs. His voice carried just enough to be audible at my table. "Definitely a budget table guest." "Who is she?" asked another groomsman, squinting in my direction. Marcus glanced over casually and shrugged. "Family obligation invite. My sister Emma. He's nice enough but not really our crowd, if you know what I mean." The group nodded knowingly. In their world, family obligation invites were an unfortunate necessity. People who had to be included for appearance's sake but didn't really belong among the successful, accomplished guests who mattered. "What does she do?" James pressed. "Some kind of hotel management thing," Marcus replied with the same dismissive tone Mom had used the night before. "Nothing significant. He's always been more of the artistic type, you know? Not particularly business-minded." I felt heat rise to my cheeks but forced myself to maintain composure. This was Marcus's night and I had no intention of causing a scene. Instead, I smiled politely and focused on my dinner, pretending not to hear the conversation that had moved on to Marcus's latest business conquests. The wedding reception continued around me like a perfectly choreographed performance. Marcus and Victoria's first dance was elegant and practiced, clearly the result of months of professional lessons. The speeches were polished and heartfelt, painting a picture of a couple destined for greatness together. Everything was exactly as the family had envisioned, a celebration worthy of Marcus's success story. As the evening progressed, I found myself feeling increasingly invisible. Conversations swirled around me about business deals, investment strategies, and political connections. When people asked what I did for work, their interest visibly waned when I mentioned hospitality management. Several times I caught Marcus's friends glancing in my direction and whispering, clearly speculating about how I'd ended up at such an elegant celebration. During the cake cutting, I stepped outside onto the hotel's terrace for some fresh air. The view of Boston Harbor was breathtaking, with city lights reflecting off the water like scattered diamonds. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like to truly belong at an event like this. To be seen as successful and accomplished rather than tolerated as a family obligation. "Excuse me, are you Emma Williams?" I turned to find a well-dressed man in his 50s approaching. His name tag identified him as Robert Chin, hotel director. "Yes, that's me," I replied, wondering if there was some issue with my room or the evening's arrangements. "Ms. Williams, I've been looking for you all evening. I wanted to personally ensure everything is perfect for tonight's celebration. Is there anything at all we can do to enhance your experience?" His level of attention seemed excessive for a regular guest, but I appreciated the professional courtesy. "Everything has been wonderful, thank you. The wedding is beautiful." "I'm delighted to hear that. If you don't mind me asking, how do you know the bride and groom?" "Marcus is my brother," I explained. Mr. Chen's expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read. "Your brother?" "Of course. Well, please don't hesitate to contact me personally if you need anything at all. Anything whatsoever." He handed me his business card with a slight bow before disappearing back into the reception. The interaction felt oddly formal, but I attributed it to the hotel's commitment to exceptional service for such a high-profile event. When I returned to the ballroom, the dancing was in full swing. Marcus and Victoria moved effortlessly through a crowd of accomplished friends and family members, each conversation another opportunity to network and build their already impressive social capital. I watched from my table as they were introduced to pharmaceutical executives, investment fund managers, and political figures who could open doors to even greater success. "She really doesn't fit in here, does she?" I heard one of Victoria's sorority sisters comment to another. They were standing near the bar, close enough to my table that their voices carried clearly. "Who?" her friend asked. "The sister. I think. She seems nice enough but definitely not their usual crowd. Marcus mentioned she works in hospitality or something. Probably doesn't make much money. Well, at least she's trying to dress appropriately. That navy dress is actually quite lovely," even if it's clearly not designer. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I kept my expression neutral. This was exactly the kind of situation I'd spent my entire life navigating, being discussed as if I weren't present, being evaluated and found wanting by people who saw me as fundamentally different from themselves. The conversation continued as the evening wore on. Marcus's business school friends dominated the area around the head table, sharing stories of recent successes and future plans. Victoria's pharmaceutical connections clustered near the bar, discussing industry trends and regulatory changes. Everyone seemed to belong to some exclusive club that required credentials I simply didn't possess. Around 11 o'clock, as the reception began winding down, I decided to head back to my room. The evening had been beautiful and Marcus looked genuinely happy, but I felt increasingly out of place among his successful friends and Victoria's accomplished family members. I said my goodbyes to the relatives at my table and made my way toward the elevator. Emma. I turned to see Marcus approaching, slightly flushed from champagne and dancing. Thanks for coming, he said, pulling me into a quick hug. I know this probably isn't your usual scene, but it means a lot that you were here. It was beautiful, Marcus. Really. Victoria looks stunning and you both seem so happy. We are. And who knows? Maybe some of this success will rub off on you eventually. He grinned, clearly intending the comment as brotherly teasing, but it stung more than he realized. Maybe, I replied with a smile. Congratulations again. As I waited for the elevator, I could hear the reception continuing behind me. Laughter, music, and the sound of people who belonged together celebrating a future full of promise and possibility. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside with relief, grateful for a moment of solitude. The elevator stopped on the 15th floor and Robert Chin, the hotel director, stepped on. He looked surprised to see me. Ms. Williams. Leaving the celebration early? Just heading to my room. It's been a long day. Of course. I hope everything exceeded your expectations this evening. Absolutely. The staff has been exceptional and the venue is gorgeous. Mr. Chin smiled, but there was something in his expression I couldn't interpret. We're honored to host such an important celebration for your family. The elevator reached the 28th floor and I stepped out into the hallway. As the doors closed behind me, I heard Mr. Chin speaking quietly into his phone. She's heading to her room now. Yes, I'll make sure everything is ready for tomorrow morning. I thought it was an odd conversation for nearly midnight, but luxury hotels operated on different schedules than the rest of the world. Probably just making arrangements for tomorrow's checkout process or some other logistical detail. My suite was more luxurious than I'd expected. A spacious living area with harbor views, a marble bathroom, and amenities that probably cost more per night than most people's monthly rent. I settled onto the sofa with a cup of tea from the room's service bar, reflecting on the evening's events. The truth was, I'd grown accustomed to being the family's afterthought. Marcus's success was real and impressive, and he deserved recognition for his achievements. If that meant I played a supporting role in family narratives, so be it. I had my own life, my own quiet satisfactions, even if they didn't translate into the kind of social capital that impressed wedding guests. The next morning I packed my belongings and prepared for checkout. The wedding had been beautiful, Marcus and Victoria were clearly well matched, and despite some uncomfortable moments, the evening had gone smoothly. I was looking forward to returning to my own routine, my own world where I didn't feel perpetually out of place. As I wheeled my suitcase toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. Thanks again for last night. You were a good sport about everything. Love you, sis. I was typing a response when the elevator doors opened to reveal Robert Chin once again. Ms. Williams, perfect timing. Would you mind joining me in my office for just a moment? There's something I need to discuss with you before you leave. His tone was professional but urgent, and I wondered if there was some issue with the bill or the room arrangements. I followed him through a series of corridors to an executive office suite I hadn't known existed. Please have a seat, he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. I wanted to personally thank you for choosing the Grand Metropolitan for your brother's wedding celebration. It was Marcus and Victoria's choice, but thank you. Everything was perfect. Mr. Chin opened a folder on his desk and consulted several documents. Ms. Williams, I have to ask, did you enjoy staying at our property? Very much. The service has been exceptional and the facilities are beautiful. I'm delighted to hear that. We take pride in exceeding expectations for all our guests. He paused, studying my face. Especially our ownership. The word hung in the air between us like a question I didn't understand. I'm sorry. Ms. Williams, surely you know that we've been expecting you? The entire staff has been briefed about your visit. We wanted to ensure everything was absolutely perfect for the weekend. I stared at him, completely confused. I think there might be some mistake. I'm just here for my brother's wedding. I don't understand what you mean about ownership. Mr. Chen's expression shifted to something approaching concern. Ms. Williams, you do realize that you own this hotel? Along with the other 47 properties in the Metropolitan Luxury Group. The words didn't make sense. I felt like I was listening to a conversation in a foreign language that I almost understood but not quite. I think you have me confused with someone else, I said slowly. I work in hospitality management, but I certainly don't own any hotels. Mr. Chen opened another folder and withdrew a series of legal documents. According to our records, Emma Catherine Williams became the sole owner of Metropolitan Luxury Group 18 months ago, following the terms of your grandmother's trust fund. The transition was handled through Pemberton Walsh and Associates in New York. My grandmother's trust fund. The phrase hit me like cold water. I remembered the meeting with the lawyers after Grandma Rose's funeral. She'd been the family's success story. A woman who'd started with nothing and built a small boarding house into something larger. The family always spoke about her modest investments and small property holdings, but nobody discussed specifics. The lawyers had explained something about assets being held in trust until I turned 28, but the language was so dense and legal that I'd barely understood what they were telling me. They'd mentioned hotel properties and investment portfolios, but I'd assumed they meant small, local establishments, maybe a few bed and breakfasts or budget motels. 18 months ago was my 28th birthday, I said quietly. Exactly. Your grandmother's instructions were very specific. All Metropolitan Luxury Group properties were to be transferred to your control when you reached that age, with the provision that the transition be handled discreetly through our management company. Mr. Chen spread several documents across his desk. Property deeds, financial statements, and corporate filings that painted a picture I'd never imagined. The Grand Metropolitan wasn't just one hotel. It was the flagship property of a luxury chain spanning major cities across the country. Boston, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Miami. Each property worth tens of millions of dollars. The total portfolio value is approximately $1.2 billion, Mr. Chen continued matter-of-factly. Your grandmother was quite the businesswoman, Ms. Williams. She started with that boarding house in Salem and spent 6 decades building one of the most successful hospitality empires on the East Coast. I stared at the documents, trying to process information that seemed to belong to someone else's life. But the family always said she had modest investments. A few small properties. Your grandmother was extremely private about her business affairs. Even our board of directors didn't know the identity of the ultimate owner until the trust documents were executed 18 months ago. We've been operating under management company oversight, waiting for you to take active control. The room seemed to spin slightly. For 18 months, while my family had been treating me like a charity case who couldn't afford to keep up with Marcus's success, I'd been unknowingly one of the wealthiest people in Massachusetts. Ms. Williams, are you all right? Can I get you some water? I nodded, still staring at the financial statements. Annual revenues in the hundreds of millions. Properties in prime locations that I'd walked past countless times without knowing I owned them. A hospitality empire that my grandmother had built quietly and left entirely to me. Why didn't anyone tell me? Finally asked. Your grandmother's instructions were very specific about discretion. She wanted you to have time to establish yourself professionally before taking on this responsibility. The management company has been overseeing operations with the understanding that you would assume control when you felt ready. And last night, the wedding reception. Mr. Chen smiled slightly. We wanted to ensure everything was perfect for your family's celebration. When we saw the booking for Marcus Williams and realized the connection, the entire staff was briefed about providing exceptional service. We had no idea you didn't know about the ownership structure. I thought about the odd looks, the overly attentive service, the special treatment that had seemed excessive for a regular guest. The staff hadn't been providing exceptional customer service. They'd been taking care of their owner. Ms. Williams, what would you like us to do? The board of directors has been eager to meet with you for months. We have quarterly reports, expansion proposals, and several acquisition opportunities that require ownership approval. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Hope you got home safely. Sorry if some of the guys were a little pretentious last night. You know how investment banker types can be. Investment banker types. I almost laughed at the irony. Mr. Chin, I need some time to process all of this. Can we schedule a meeting for next week? I'd like to review everything properly. Of course. Should I arrange for our legal team to brief you on the corporate structure? And perhaps our financial advisors can walk you through the portfolio performance. That would be helpful. I gathered the documents he'd given me, my hands still slightly trembling. One more thing. Last night my brother and his friends, they didn't know about any of this. No, ma'am. Your grandmother's discretion instructions were very clear. Only essential management personnel were informed of the ownership structure. I stood to leave, my mind racing with implications I was only beginning to understand. At the door I turned back to Mr. Chin. The wedding bill. For last night's reception. Already taken care of, Ms. Williams. Complimentary, naturally. We were honored to host your family's celebration. The elevator ride to the lobby felt surreal. I was the same person who had arrived 2 days ago, but everything had changed. As I walked through the opulent lobby toward the exit, I saw it with completely different eyes. This wasn't just a luxury hotel where my brother had gotten married. This was my luxury hotel. One of 48 properties that I apparently owned. My phone rang as I reached the street. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Hey, just wanted to make sure you got out okay. Victoria and I are about to head to the airport for our honeymoon. Everything's fine, Marcus. Have a wonderful trip. Thanks. And hey, sorry again if last night felt a little overwhelming. Victoria's crowd can be pretty intense and my business school friends aren't always the most inclusive. You handled it well. It was fine. Really? Good. When we get back from Tuscany, maybe we can grab dinner. I'd love to hear more about what you're working on these days. Your hotel management thing. My hotel management thing. I looked back at the Grand Metropolitan, its elegant facade gleaming in the morning sunlight. I'd like that, I said. I have quite a bit to tell you about my work. After hanging up, I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching hotel guests come and go through the revolving doors. Business executives, tourists, families, all of them passing through a property that belonged to me. In a few hours, I would go home to my modest apartment and try to make sense of documents that described assets worth more than $1 billion. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for celebrating with us last night. The hotel was absolutely perfect. We couldn't have asked for a better venue. Hope you enjoyed yourself despite being surrounded by all us Type A personalities. I typed back. It was beautiful. The hotel really is exceptional. That was certainly true. And in a few days, when I met with Mr. Chin and the board of directors, I would begin to understand exactly how exceptional it really was. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hailed a taxi. For years, I'd watched Marcus climb the ladder of success while family members dismissed my career as insignificant. Last night, his friends had whispered about budget table guests and family obligation invites while sitting in a ballroom that belonged to me. But perhaps the most remarkable part wasn't the wealth I'd inherited. It was my grandmother's wisdom in keeping it hidden until I was ready. She'd understood something about success that the rest of my family had missed. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It can afford to wait quietly in the shadows until the right moment to emerge. As my taxi pulled away from the Grand Metropolitan, I caught a glimpse of Marcus and Victoria exiting through the main doors, their luggage being loaded into a limousine by hotel staff who had spent the weekend treating them like VIP guests in a property that belonged to their budget table relative. I smiled to myself and settled back into the seat. Next week, I would have some very interesting conversations with my family about my little hotel management thing. But for now, I was content to let them enjoy their honeymoon in Tuscany, blissfully unaware that their family's afterthought had just discovered she owned one of the most successful hospitality empires on the East Coast. The taxi driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Good wedding. Perfect, I replied, looking out at the city where I apparently owned several luxury properties. Absolutely perfect.